My name's Elizabeth, and we're happy to have you join us today, Conferring with Middle School Students, here presented by Demonstrated Success. We're happy to have you here today. I just wanted to tell you all, so you can tell your colleagues as well, you will always get a follow-up email from us 24 to 48 hours after we give a webinar with a link to the slides, your professional development certificate, and any handouts the presenter talks about. So please be patient, and that email will get to you tomorrow afternoon. Participation is always encouraged. Please use the chat screen or the Q&A screen. We tend to try to use Q&A for your questions, and I will interrupt Tammy as we go along and make sure those get answered. If you have information that's good for everybody, please put that in your chat box so everyone can see that and share in your knowledge. And at the very end of the webinar, a feedback survey will pop up actually when you close out of Zoom. And we really hope you take the 2 minutes it takes or minute it takes to fill that out for us. Your feedback is really important to us. Thank you. This is our agenda that Tammy will go through for you today. And as she transitions from topic to topic, she'll highlight what part of the agenda we are on, which is a terrific way to stay on task for us and for you folks to understand what's coming up. My name's Elizabeth Dion. I am the Office Administrator and Event Specialist here at Demonstrated Success, and your presenter today is Tammy Hilton. Tammy has almost 20 years of educational experience, including training with Fountas and Pinnell, Lucy Calkins, and the Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy. I know you'll be very happy with all she shares. Just wanted to give you a little bit of information about our company in case you aren't sure of who we are. We are a K-12 education consulting company located in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. We provide professional development in 3 areas we like to bucket as math and literacy support, data to inform instruction, and school improvement and culture. We were founded 4 years ago and provide customized professional development to support teachers like you. I notice that some of the districts we've worked with are here today, and we appreciate you coming. We are also contracted by the Department of Ed to support all New Hampshire educators through a data coaching program and select schools in our areas for school improvement. We hope you get a better idea of the way we can support you in topics like literacy today. Thanks so much. Tammy, I'll let you take it over with why conferring is so important.
All right, thank you so much, Beth. I'm really excited to have all of you here today. I want to thank you for joining us, as Beth said. So we're going to try to get through a lot in under 45 minutes at this point. So like she said, feel free to put your questions or your thoughts into the Q&A or into the chat, and we will definitely try to get through them throughout the presentation, or at least at the end in that questions and wrap-up section. So we're going to start just very briefly talking about why conferring is important. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but I did want to share some thoughts around this just to kind of set the foundation and purpose for today's webinar. So one thing, research has proven that it actually really, conferring is great because it does sort of teach kids how to learn. And so I found this really great quote that's in the orange box here from Why Conferring Matters. It was an article published in 2017, and it talked about how research on the brain shows that positive comments and conversations actually cause a chemical high for our students, which gives them less stress and a better learning experience. And so conferring really does help make learning authentic and meaningful for kids because of the feedback it allows us to provide to them. And then conferring is really, it's a really critical component to our work as teachers. We should not think of it as an add-on to our day. Carl Anderson, who I'll refer to periodically throughout this presentation, and you'll have some links to some of his stuff in the resource folder that Beth mentioned you'll get in an email. He talked about how conferring was truly the sweet spot of learning for kids, and he alludes to it in that quote there in the yellow box. And conferring is really awesome because it really validates students. And especially in middle school, we know that every student really wants to feel like their voice matters and that they're heard. And so that's why conferring can be really great. How it's beneficial specifically for middle and high school students, kind of thinking about those secondary students that we have. So really it helps students to expect more from themselves. And if you are familiar with the book Choice Words by Peter Johnston, he discussed sort of this idea of that students, where they are and how to get to what they need, produce emotionally and rationally healthy learning communities, intellectual environments that produce more technical competence, but caring and secure, actively literate human beings come from it when that happens. And then the zone of proximal development is also sort of tied in with conferring. Professor Neil Mercer christened that balancing the interthinking of the development zone and the proximal development through regular dialogue keeps everyone focused on pressing towards these goals and creating new ones. It also helps students to manage workloads, because conferring is not only about us as teachers meeting students where they're at, but it's also about modeling how to break down, larger concepts or thinking, make steps more manageable. And we're also modeling like how we're note-taking and tracking thinking and so on and so forth by conferring with students. And then it also really helps to build that student-teacher relationship, which is so important, especially now. I have found that I connected more genuinely with students if I took handwritten notes and put a lot of my effort into listening to them as they were talking. And it also allows the opportunity for, us to sort of encourage and share with each other and kids among kids as well. So that was just sort of a very brief foundation. Now we're going to launch into the methods and structures of conferring. And so one thing I thought that was really important for us to sort of set this premise and thinking about all the different ways we could confer with students is thinking about what it is and what it's not. And so this infographic was published by Heinemann. I believe it came from one of Jennifer Saravello's books. And if you don't know her, she's written the Reading Strategies book, the Writing Strategies book. She's also written a lot of books about conferring as well. And so here on the left, we can see what conferring is. So it really is offering guided practice and meaningful feedback to students. It's a time for them to be working. It's a time for us to be teaching them as learners. It's not a time when we're just assessing them by giving them pop quizzes or lecturing them or, having us as teachers do all the talking. And then I also wanted to highlight the importance of the difference between a check-in and conferring, because sometimes teachers get this sort of mixed up. So checking in really is just touching base and sort of responding to surface level student behaviors. And so conferring goes a lot deeper than that. It's really about digging deeper and individualizing instruction. When we do a check-in with students, it's usually to say like, oh, you need to do 3 more math problems. And then we kind of walk away, or, oh, you might want to go back and recheck this answer. Whereas conferring, we're leaving them with specifically new acquired skills and or goal making to make sure that they can really understand those next steps and be able to move on. So no matter what type of conference you do, and we're going to launch into the different types of conferences here momentarily, but these are sort of the general ways that you would approach conferring, no matter if you were doing it in small group or individually. And so this also works no matter what subject area or grade level you teach. And to do conferring, you don't need to have a specific program or specific curriculum to follow in order to be able to do it. So one thing that's great about conferring with middle school students is that it allows us to have sort of this quote unquote real conversation with them. And we know working with middle school students that they want authenticity, right? Like they can sniff a fake a mile away. And so through conferring, you really get to learn about what students are trying to do as writers or as readers or as scientists or historians, depending on what you teach. And and how well they're doing it. It also, with conferring, really gets to this idea of a conversational tone. And so again, middle school students are really intuitive. For example, how many times do you hear, they yelled at me, right? Like, when in reality, it may just be that someone talked to them in a stern tone. So tone is really the foundation for good relationships and the type of relationship we want to develop with our students over the course of the school year. So when we confer, we want to make sure we speak in a warm, friendly manner that really puts them at ease, and it will make them more likely to open up to us and really sort of dig down into what they're struggling with, what they feel they're doing well with, etc. And that's really what's going to help you decide what to teach them as the teacher, and and then in turn help them grow as learners. Another thing you want to do is you really want to sit with the students. So how you sit, and how you are with them sort of establishes the foundation for that conference right from the beginning. So middle school students already have such a problem with authority, right? That standing over them to sort of infer to them will seem like a power move. And they're not going to give us a whole lot in that aspect. And so by sitting sort of alongside them or across from them or next to them, you're really going to set the tone that right from the beginning that you're sort of on the same level, that this really does matter. And then you want to make sure that you are doing active listening. So you want to give some wait time to their responses. You want to ask them to say more. You want to ask them to repeat things, and really always go back to the specific strategies that you're trying to get them to learn. All right, so now we're going to launch into those different types of conferences. So the first type is an individual conference, which I'm sure we're probably all very familiar with. This is the one that teachers tend to feel the most confident with. But I did want to put in here sort of what they look like and what they are. So these really are just individual conferences. They are one-on-one with a student. They're great though, because you can gain some really great formative sort of knowledge from sitting one-on-one with a student. You also get to do some really responsive teaching, sort of this in the moment teaching, and gather some great data as well. And so in that email Beth had mentioned, you will get a link to a folder, and in that folder, this presentation will be there. So you're able to go back and watch all of these videos, look at all of these resources. We're not going to watch every single one that I've linked in here for the sake of time today, but I did want to put them in there just so that you could get a variety of ways that teachers confer. And so I'm going to show you just a brief snippets of this second one over here with an intro from the teacher. And then we're going to jump to a quick 5th grade example with a student, which I know 5th grade sometimes is elementary, but then a lot of middle schools are becoming 5-8 middle schools. So I wanted to put this in there in case you are from a 5-8 middle school, which I believe we have some here today, just so you can kind of see the specific language that this teacher uses with this student, how she's doing the handwritten notes, and the ways that she's using the strategies. So let's just take a peek at the teacher intro, and then we'll launch ahead to Brian, the 5th grade student.
As the role of teacher, you have to be very active. You can never sort of just relax. I know a lot of times in the olden days, again, I'm going to say that because I'm old enough to know the olden days, you used to get the kids reading quietly, and then you sort of took a break or got ready for your next lesson you had to teach. But that's as critical as any other part of the lesson, because that's where I get new information. It's where I know what to teach next. It's to know if I need to back up and reteach something, who's stuck and needs some extra support for me. That's where I get all my information on what I do tomorrow and what I'm going to talk about the next day. Today, I just sat at the table and did conferencing, but a lot of times you have to know your kids, first of all, and what kind of conferencing you need to do. A lot of times I'm on the floor with the kids. Depending on what the kids' needs are, I might have to do longer conferences to do some pre-reading with some of my lower readers. It lets me know, number one, are they choosing the appropriate books? If not, I have to do a little more help with them choosing their material. Number two, are they working on the strategies that we're working on in the class? Are they understanding And do they know the strategies if they're stuck? And there's a lot of, especially in nonfiction, there's a lot of complicated things. They can still, read the stories, but there's difficult things, how they can maneuver around those things. Because my goal is not to teach the books that we have. My goal is to teach them as readers. Kevin.
So I think that's really important before we launch into Brian. I think that's a really important thing that she just said, is that we are teaching them as readers or as writers, or again, possibly, historians if we teach social studies, or scientists if we teach science, but we're really teaching the learner. I think as secondary teachers, we get so caught up in this idea that we're teaching specific books or we're teaching, specific content that we, I know I was guilty of it. For example, like someone, one year I taught for the first time with a special ed teacher, and he said to me, "What are you teaching?" And I said, "Well, I'm teaching To Kill a Mockingbird." And he was like, "Okay, but what are you teaching?" I'm like, "What do you mean? I just told you." And so we had this great conversation where, to me, it was so simple. Like, I knew what I was teaching, but to him, he was like, "No, like, are you teaching how to infer? Are you teaching theme? Are you teaching character traits? Like, what is it you're teaching?" And I think if we tend to do that as teachers, this is where students can sometimes get confused too. Like, because they'll say, "Oh yeah, I'm doing To Kill a Mockingbird in English," but they never say, "Oh, I'm learning, about character traits," or "We're learning about multiple themes across, this book," or "We're learning about how, history repeats itself," or whatever it might be. So now I want to jump ahead to Brian. Again, he's a 5th grade student. He's just starting a book here. And so sometimes teachers get, a little bit caught up. They're not really sure what to do when a kid's like, "Oh, I'm on page 1 of a book." So I want to kind of show you how this teacher goes through. Again, notice the proximity, notice, her compliments and the way that she talks to this student here in 5th grade. So we'll just watch a little bit of this.
Today is called The Hunted.
What's your book about so far?
My book is about like I'm just starting on chapter 1, so I guess the boy, I think his name is Max. He is just starting. He is dreaming because his family is in the woods, and he's dreaming that he's the wild boy, and he's talking about animals chasing him, and he's almost he's almost falling off a cliff, and animals are still rushing toward him, like buffaloes and wild cow.
And that's all happening in his dream.
Yes.
Okay. Open the book to where you're at. Show me exactly where you're at. Why don't you read from there to yourself? And when you're done, look up at me. Which of the reading comprehension strategies we've been working on are you using as you read?
One that I'm using is inferring. I inferred when I first started. I inferred that he was dreaming.
How did you infer that?
I inferred that because in the first beginning of the book, it says that he is thinking that he's wild boy, and then that's when I inferred that he's either sleeping or daydreaming.
Okay, very nice. Are you still using questioning to help you out with the book?
Yes.
How do you use questioning?
How I use questioning is I find an important idea and I ask a question about it. And one of my questions were, what is happening to the 12-year-old boy? Because he in the first beginning, like in the middle of the book, in the middle of this chapter that I'm reading, he is running. He's running toward a cliff, and I was wondering like what is going to happen.
Fantastic. You're doing a really good job with the book so far. I want you to get really clear on that main character's name, though. Okay. Okay. I'm going to check back in with you at the end of the week and see how far you've gotten and see what you think of the book now. Okay. Thank you.
All right. So again, I wanted to show you that because he was just starting a book, which can always be tricky, but this teacher handled it really well. His goal, we always want to leave kids with a goal at the end of conferring. In this case, it was, I just need you to really get that main character down, like especially the name, right? Because that's going to be super important as you read. for the rest of this book because you are only on chapter 1. I hope that you were also able to notice the specific language that she and the student were using. So she asked things like, what comprehension strategies are you using? What questioning strategies are you using? And then he parroted it back to her with that language too. The questioning strategies I'm using are, the comprehension strategies I'm using are. And so that's why conferring can be really great because it really helps the kids hone in on what they're teaching and what they're learning and what you're teaching as well. And so then I've also linked you to this video in here because this is also an early middle school student. And again, the teacher, you'll notice, is sitting here in proximation to the student. We won't watch this whole thing, but I want you to also hear sort of the tone and the way that this conference goes on. But I put this in here because this student is vastly different than Brian that we just saw. This student is going to be clearly well-versed in this idea of conferring. He's probably most likely what we would call a high flyer or an above grade level student. And this is why conferring is also great because I think as teachers, we really, education in general, we always tend to focus on moving kids up, like getting kids sort of raising the bar and like moving them up to grade level if they're struggling. We do really great work with the struggling kids and getting them what they need. But sometimes those gifted kids, those high flying kids, they tend to get left by the wayside with little enrichment opportunities. Again, this is in general, not in any one of your specific districts. And so conferring is really all about not only supporting students and helping them along, but also enriching them and pushing them to the next level. And so I'll play you just a couple of minutes of this so you can kind of see what this looks like, and then we'll move on to the other types.
So talk to me a little bit about what you're working on as a reader. What are some of the things that you're working?
Well, I'm working on looking into the book, into the text to find some bigger images, see what reoccurring images that could help me find the overall idea of the book. Also, digging deeper into the book. And I'm also looking at secondary characters and ones that could help besides the main character to get a feel of the whole book and understand what it's about.
Nice, nice. Can I stop you for a second? So one thing, can you spend a little bit of time, you say finding the big images, like the recurring images of the text that you're reading right now. Have you been working on that in Mississippi Trial? Is that what some of the work you've been doing? Let's see how that's been going. Like talk it through a little bit. How did it go?
Okay, well, one reoccurring image I found was about this river that the main character goes to.
Yeah.
And he uses it as an escape, sort of when there are hard things going on in his life. And he also uses it to meet this girl that he likes to talk to, and he always meets her there.
Right.
And he eventually, one thing that happens is a dead body is found in this river of someone he knows, and it's a very big mystery. And so he stops, well, that was actually a different river. So he starts fishing in this river. So he starts using it more and more. And so it kept popping up in the story. So I was looking into how it could be important to the plot and what was going on.
Nice. Well, Jonah, one of the things that I want to say that I just think is absolutely so awesome is that you're doing this really sophisticated work of recognizing when images exist in a text and how they keep occurring over and over in that text, right? But one of the things, like there's an idea that I have that I might want to, that you might want to think about a little bit, right? It's a little tip that you can kind of consider. And it goes like this. You know how like when you're reading Mississippi Trial, you keep seeing like over and over again, like this river kind of pop up and it has like a deeper symbolic meaning. Mm-hmm. The same thing can happen when you look across lots of books, right? So when you're looking across lots of books, you can ask yourself like, what are the images or the themes that keep creeping up in many of the things that I've read?
All right, so that just gives you a little taste. Again, this video will be linked in the presentation and you can certainly go in and watch all of it. From here, this teacher is going to have this student practice a little bit with this tip that he just gave him so that he can kind of see how the student does, which is something that we want to do in conferring. So just go back here and we will move along. Okay. So the next type of conference that you might do with students is a compliment conference. And so these are super, super quick. Basically, they are a great way to gather information on learners. And this information might help you form those small groups that you will do for small group instruction. This can be done one-on-one. Compliment conferences can also be done with table or small groups. They basically just start with a compliment to students. You explicitly state exactly what it is that they're doing that contributes to their learning progress. And then you offer a way that they can use a strategy or an exemplar to keep moving. So for example, you might say, oh, I really love the way that you're tracking your thoughts there. Or I love the way that you're noticing this, like, which is what that teacher just did with Jonah in that previous video. And so I've linked you to this video here where the teacher goes through, video is under 5 minutes and she gets through about 4 quick compliment conferences. She just keeps going around table to table, asking the students what they're doing. She looks a little bit at their work and then she gives them a compliment and, then moves on. So just a quick sort of like meaningful thing to keep students going.
Tammy,
Yes.
I just wanted to ask a question that's come up.
Sure.
And I'm not sure if we want to watch the video or continue before you answer this, but how would you recommend we make this work with online learning or hybrid, as particularly, as we're entering the winter and schools may turn into this if they're not already offering it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so this is something I definitely experienced in the classroom last year when working with the students. And so it can be a little bit tricky, but you definitely, it is plausible. So you may have, let's say it's a writing, you want to confer with students about their writing, whether it's they've written something for you in history class or language arts class or whatever. And so you might be in a Zoom very much like this with a student, or you might have a breakout room with students if you're trying to do it with a small group. And you might just, obviously you're not there to be able to see their writing. So in this case, you will definitely want to have your cameras on because again, it's all about that face-to-face. It's all about building that relationship, seeing each other's visual feedback, setting the tone, things like that. And then you will have to ask them to read you a little bit of the writing that they have done. And then you'll kind of go through and, do this similar things from there. You will definitely want to offer them a compliment on their writing. You might have them work together. We're going to watch a video example in a little bit or part of it about small groups. And so you might offer feedback that way as best you can. You'll still leave them with a goal, something that they can keep working on as well. So it's not ideal, but it definitely can be done. And if that is something that you would like more information about, I highly encourage you to email me because I lived this for the last 2 years in the classroom as a middle school teacher. And so I'd be more than happy to sort of give you some more video examples or just kind of chat through ways via email or Zoom conference that we could talk about that for sure. Any other questions, Beth, before we move on?
Not yet. No, thank you.
Great. All right. And so the teaching conference is what you saw that teacher with Jonah, the gifted learner, start to do. So he did a little bit of research. He gave Jonah a compliment. Then he was launching into teaching him a specific strategy or skill that he could do across all of his reading. And then we didn't see the end of it, but when you go back, if you watch the video at the end, you'll see he left Jonah with sort of a plan or a goal to sort of link back and track his work about that intertextuality that Jonah was referring to, that he was starting for the work. And so these also can be very quick. They're usually like 5 minutes or less. They can go a little bit longer depending on the student. Jonah's video is going to be 7 minutes, which is probably the longest that would go. But again, he was a gifted student. He was really giving a lot of great answers. And so you don't want to just ignore that. These types of conferences could also be done in small group, and they all adaptable for reading or writing. And so I've linked you to an infographic here. And then this video with Jen Sarabello doing one with, again, like a 5th grade student here. And then I've linked you to ways that this can also be done for writing. So anytime you see a blue thing like this, when you get the presentation, you'll have the link to that. And then if it was something that was printable, we'll also have the separate document in the folder Beth mentioned. All right. And then
Tammy, I do have another question.
Sure.
Wanted to ask from another person, wanted to ask you, how do you manage student behavior while you're doing this?
Yeah, so
I mean, we don't all have those students that are always paying attention and doing what they're supposed to be doing at that moment, right?
in middle school, I am shocked. I know. Oh my goodness. Trust me, I had a wonderful group of 8th graders, mostly boys in my class. So I feel you all out there. Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about this later on in the presentation, but it really comes down to like structures and routines and sort of setting a tone and an importance for this work. And once you get your students trained, and again, we'll talk a little bit about this later on, but it definitely can happen, but it can be tough. I mean, like I said, my class last year, I had 12 boys, 8th grade boys in a classroom for ELA. At the end of the day, it was not their favorite subject. They made it very well known. So it was, a work in progress for sure. However, and then when you have, if I were to have had 25, it would have been even worse. And I know some of you have class sizes of 35, 40 out there possibly. So it definitely can be done. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And then if I still don't answer that question, definitely circle back to us at the end and we'll go more in depth with that for sure. All right, so the next type of conference is a table group. And so these are really great because you basically just find a table, doesn't matter who's sitting at it. You don't have to regroup kids. It could just be the table that they're at. You're going to start with that compliment about their reading or their writing or whatever it is they're doing. You always want to have a visual. So even if it's just a chart or a personal example or some sort of post-it, but whatever it is, to sort of give them a visual of the skill you want to highlight or you want them working on. You want to leave that example with them. So, you might leave it on the table and say, hey, I really want to compliment you all on your hard work with X, Y, and Z. I'm going to leave this example right here. And I'm going to come back in a few minutes to see how you might use this example I'm leaving you to sort of push your learning a little bit further. And then once you check back with kids, that's when you could either launch into a small strategy group conference if they all are not understanding it, or if they all need enrichment because they're blowing it out of the water, or it might turn into individual conferences with students from that table. So it's just a great way to gather some quick formative data without having to spend a whole lot of time with students. And then the last type of conference you might think about is that small group or strategy conference that we talk about. So this one here, I've just listed some elements to success. Again, you want to have those visuals. You want kids to bring specific materials with them. You want them to be doing most of the work. You do not want to expect mastery right away. I think this is another hard thing for us as teachers, is that we want mastery because then it makes us feel like we've done our job, but they're not going to master this right away. And so that's okay, because we want conferring to set up this environment that like we are practicing, we are learning, we are failing, but we're failing to learn, and learning to fail sort of thing. And it's going to drive us to be better. And then you want to teach within cycles of this small group work because it's always repeated for more practice. And then just some more reasons why they're really great, especially with middle school students. They're really allowing kids to take a close look at how they're, thinking and reading and writing and giving feedback to others and themselves. It's helping with foundational skills as well as enrichment skills, and it's helping kids understand what they need. And then just for you as teachers, you really want to map out your teaching points and sort of your mini lessons throughout the entire unit. So what are those skills you want these kids to learn by the end of To Kill a Mockingbird, or by the end of our Civil War unit, or whatever it might be. You want to sort of determine predictable areas where kids are going to need reinforcement or enrichment. You might start creating a toolkit. So again, printing off visuals or graphic organizers or just things that you feel like would be really helpful to kids at some point. You want to observe them throughout the unit through a variety of different ways. And then that will help you determine your small groups. But if you fail to plan, then, you know, it's definitely not going to go well for you in terms of this. So this video here, again, we won't watch for the sake of time, but this teacher has taken a learning progression and she is using it to show kids, and she's asking the kids like, okay, where on this learning progression do you feel like your writing is? Take a look at your writing, match it up right now, kind of assess yourself. And then let's talk about the differences between a level 1 and a level 3 or a 2 and a 4 or whatever it is you have. And let's talk about how to get your writing there. So those are things that you will see in that video. And then this is a video I referenced earlier. This is with middle school students. This is a writing conference. So again, we won't watch this completely for the sake of time because I know we're getting down into our last 10 minutes, but I did want to just show you this video just to give you a little bit of sense of what it might look like briefly.
So I brought you here because I was looking at your essays and I feel like you're ready to be pushed as writers. The way that I thought I could push you as a writer today is for us to work on our conclusions. Okay, and I think you guys have a sense of this, that conclusions in essay can feel either like they're just doing the job, right? Like you get to the end of an essay and it's just sort of like the end. Right? Or a conclusion of an essay can feel like you leave the essay feeling even more convinced that that writer is right about the world. Okay? We want to study today what it takes to make a conclusion that makes you leave the essay feeling like, wow, that writer knows what they're talking about. The way we're going to try that today is I have a few different conclusions on the same essay all written up, okay? And they all do some different things. What I'd like you guys to do is, can you just start looking at them, reading them, and thinking as a group, which of these conclusions is the strongest to the weakest, okay? Go ahead, and I'll be coaching in and helping you out.
Okay, so let's start with that one that Joseph has.
So let's get it in a place where you all can kind of look at it.
So again, I want you to notice she's having students do most of the work. She specifically said, I want you guys to jump in. I'm going to be coaching in, but I'm really here listening to you. And then if we were to continue this video, you would see students sort of working through that ranking assignment that she just asked them to do, really reading those conclusion options, thinking about, you know, what she's asked them to do, which one best fits with the essay, so on and so forth. And so she's provided the visual, she's given them a specific task, she's letting them do most of the work. And then she will leave them with a goal to keep moving their writing forward with conclusions at the end. And if you are not familiar with her, if you don't recognize the teacher here, that's Kate Roberts. So she's written a number of books in the world of secondary literacy. DIY literacy is one of her more famous ones. And she also has worked with Lucy Calkins, Janet Teachers College, phenomenal person in the field. So if you haven't checked out her work, I highly recommend that you do that as well. But again, I highly encourage you to go back and look at the video in the entirety too. And this video is about 10 minutes long. And so that's really what a small group conference will be. It will be about 10 minutes or under. And then just some other ways that you might think about conferring. Here's an infographic here. No matter what you do though, you want to keep it simple. And again, conferring can happen. Any of these structures that we've talked about can happen in any content area or grade level. So here's one here. This one, very similar to the research, to the teaching conference with the research, decide, teach, link. They call it minor, mirror, model, and mentor, but it's pretty similar. Also, we mentioned Carl Anderson earlier on in the presentation. So you're going to get a link to this entire document, but he is big with conferring with writers. And so he put this sort of if-then together with some predictable issues that he noticed coming up for kids, and then what he did as a teacher to sort of teach them to help remedy that. And so it continues here. And then keys to a successful conference in general, you really want to sort of think about the reading and the learning habits. So data points can sometimes hinder the teacher's work with kids if they're not in the moment. So you really do want that in the moment data. Conferences or conferring with kids should definitely not be a burden. And if it feels that way, just start talking to kids about what they're reading or learning, and then, build from there. Just start having conversations if this is new for you, and then let those conversations sort of drive the learning and stuff from there. And if a conference doesn't go well for some reason, it's okay. Reframe it, start over the next day. They're all not going to go perfect. Things and, schools are not going to go perfect. You could get interrupted with fire drills. There could be some sort of behavioral incident. So if students are not sort of picking up what you're putting down, so to speak, it's okay. Because really what we're trying to show kids is that through conferring, we're building this safe learning zone. And Kathleen Tolan, who comes out of Columbia University. And if you use the Lucy Calkins units of study, she's written a lot of those. She's been a co-author on those. She said, no kid is going to be worse off with a mediocre conference, which is true. Even if the conference is blah, it's still better than not conferring with students at all. And then some frequently asked questions about how long they should last. So for individual students, you can expect them to last about 5 to 7 minutes. Or with groups of students, could be about that 7 to 10 mark that we referred to before. How many should you get to? So it depends on the length of your class. So if you teach in a 45-minute block, which most middle schools will sort of tend to teach in, you might get through 2 to 3 individual conferences and 1 small group in that class period. If you teach in a 90-minute class period, which might be more like your block scheduling with high school teachers, you could get through 4 to 5 individuals and 1 to 3 small groups. And then managing that behavior, again, you have to have those structures and routines in place. Every student has to have a mission or a specific goal to teach. So if kids go off to work independently, you have to ensure that they know exactly what it is they're supposed to be working on, and they could pull from a toolbox of things, because you're not going to focus just on tracking character traits throughout an entire novel, right? Like you might start off that way, but then you might ask them to start thinking about secondary characters or how the setting is now influencing the characters. And so every day they're building, and they can always go back and just add to this toolbox, but they have to have something. And if they're unclear of what that is, that's when your behaviors are going to pop up. And then you also want to make sure that because you're going to be working with small groups and individual students, that they also know that they have a peer that they could turn to, mentor resources, and additional resources like graphic organizers and materials and things in that space for them to go to without having to go to you all the time. Because really what conferring does is it also helps us build independence among students. And then the video that you'll see there is Penny Kittle. She's another literacy guru in the field with literacy. So record keeping and data, I've linked you to some different templates and ways that you could keep track of all of this. So these are all going to be in that resource folder. Using anchor charts, just referring back to anchor charts is a great way too, like noting back to specific skills, maybe putting post-its of kids where they're at or which skill they're working on, or having them do it every day is a great way to use anchor charts as well. And then I've linked you to some other tool plates, if-then things. This is the document to that full Carl Anderson template that I showed you earlier on in the presentation. And then just some quick ways that we could confer across content areas. I want you to notice your other non-ELA sort of core contents, but then even your specialists can do this too. Music, art, all of those. If we are asking kids to read, write, speak, and listen in our class, like these are skills that we could confer around. And so these are just different ways that could happen. And then finally in here, I have linked you to a chart that a teacher created. So she created sort of her own thing where she wrote down problems that she came across in conferring, the causes that she thought they happened because of, what she tried, and then what she wants to try, just to keep herself on track. And this is going to happen. Again, conferring is not going to happen perfectly overnight. And so here at the end of the presentation, you'll also be linked to some other websites that are really helpful, videos, different websites of people, etc. The article Conferring Across the Day is more on Carl Anderson. He did an interview about how conferring in math through the writing can be really helpful. And then again, Penny Kittle, Kelly Gallagher, secondary teachers, Jen Saravello, they're all in there. So Beth, are there any final questions or anything before we let people go?
I don't see any other questions, but I'd love to point out that if anyone has one after the webinar, please feel free to reach out to Tammy or to me, and I can get the question answered from Tammy. But we are here to be your resource and here to help you be as successful as you can be.
Definitely. Please feel free to reach out. And so with that, we just want to say thank you so much for joining us. Again, you'll get a pop-up to a survey once you close your browser. We really do use this to sort of drive our instruction and our support of you all in the schools and the things that you need and want support with, and also how to make these presentations better and more meaningful and worth your time. So please fill that out with us. And then we just wanted to show you some upcoming things that are totally free and open to you as educators in New Hampshire that are coming up. So we have a couple of PLC series that are coming up that you can join. And then on December 14th, I will be presenting cross-content literacy strategies. Again, we have down that it's listed for mostly high school. So a lot of the examples used in that will be high school examples, but that does not mean you as middle school people cannot join in, because pretty much everything is adaptable for middle and high school learners in there. So we hope to see you there. And then my contact information will be here for you. So again, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and please reach out if you have any questions or thoughts around conferring that you want to just collaborate with and get some more support around. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Tammy. Thanks, everyone. Be well. Stay healthy.